I've always been a firm believer that you can't cross the same river twice, but let's try to do that in this video.
Thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel and making it the best it can be.
Hey fantasy fans, it's Dan here with Treebeard Book Reviews, and today I'm going to be talking about a memory wipe. This is a conversation I had with my wife a few days ago where she kind of asked me and put me on the spot. If you could read a book again, have your memory erased of that book and read it and experience it for the same time again, what books would you pick? So this was tough for me because like I said, I'm a firm believer in you can't cross the same river twice. And, if I erased my memory now and I read that book now, would I actually still have the same experience that I had the first time I read it? The answer is probably clearly no. So the caveat of this is, I would wipe my memory and read the book again and have the exact, and it would hopefully be the exact same experience that I had the first time reading it. So I picked 5 books that I thought, if I was to capture that enjoyment again, which 5 books would I pick? So I've broken this down into just to a list of 5 books. It's kind of fun, and it's really more just to kind of like elicit comments from you guys because I really want to see, what are the 5 books that you would pick that would, if you could just wipe that memory, read them again at the exact same level of enjoyment. And yeah, I really want to see what you guys put. So let's get on with the list and let's talk about these books. So I really like put these in no particular order. I just thought, and a lot of these books are some of my favorite books of all time, and it's probably because that they are my favorite books of all time that they're on this list, obviously. And I really think about the headspace I was in when I was reading these books, and like the type of experience I had, and how it kind of colored my opinion of them. And I don't think if this could really ever happen, I don't think you would ever enjoy them that first time, because it's about reading a book at the right time and the right moment and the right stage in your life. So the first book, I actually picked a series, so it's kind of going to be cheat, but that series was Harry Potter. These books, I read these I think when I started reading Harry Potter for the first time, I believe Chamber of Secrets is already out, and we were waiting for Prisoner of Azkaban to come out. So I kind of got on the train early, and Harry Potter was just such a phenomenon. Like I don't think it's something we're ever going to see again, potentially in the literary world, where people were queuing up at midnight to get the books. They're like I did. I remember lining up for Order of the Phoenix at midnight to go in and get that book. Like it was just such a craze, a phenomenon, and I absolutely adore Harry Potter. I don't know how many times I've read the series. Like I used to listen to the audiobooks a lot. Like really like the Jim Dale audiobooks, and I would listen to them over and over again when I lived in England because I had to commute. I had to take like the tube and like a bus to get to work, so my commute was like an hour long, and I would just listen to these audiobooks over and over again, and I just loved them because I was such a fan of the world and how it made me feel, and just it's such a comfort place for me. And every time I listen or read Harry Potter, I still get so much enjoyment out of that series, but I don't think it ever really you're never really going to recapture that first kind of spark that was the original Harry Potter series. So yeah, Harry Potter, if I could wipe my memory and read it again, I would in a heartbeat to experience it the first time. So the 4th book that I picked is actually number 4 in this series. And I enjoyed this series. Books 1 to 3 were pretty solid, but it was really around the 4th book where it's cemented in my mind that, okay, I'm going to see this series to the end. It's one of my favorite series of all time. And it just blew me away, and it took this book to places this series to places I never thought it would go. And that book is The Shadow Rising, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. This book really just opened up the world for me. I loved where the story went with the characters of Rand and Matt, and the relationships that kind of get exposed, and like the cultures you get exposed to as a reader, and the trials that kind of your main crew keep dealing with. This book, it blew me away, and it's probably my favorite Wheel of Time book still. It has so much in it, and it made me excited to read the series more, and it just really kind of convinced me. I'm like, okay, I have to see the end of this series. I have to know what happens to these characters. And it was really around the Shadow Rising that it just captured my imagination and really held it in my mind. So yeah, I absolutely love the Shadow Rising. Like I said, it's my favorite Wheel of Time book. And it's just, when I read it, like it and it hit so hard when I read it. And I'm trying to think, typically with the books, when I've read them the first time, I have a very strong like picture in my mind of where I read them, what I was doing. And I remember, reading that book. I first moved into my house, my first house that I bought, and it was right at the beginning of near COVID. And I just wanted something comforting, and like it's not a comforting book, but it really just hit me on an emotional level at that time. All right, so the third book that I picked is actually a book I read last year, and last year it was actually a reread for me, and it was one of those books where it's a big book. I read it so fast. I think I read it in like 3 or 4 days. I was reading like 200 pages a day, just couldn't put it down. And that book is Dune by Frank Herbert. So this is my book club edition of Dune. It's with the old old cover. This book is stunning. I need to read more of the Dune series by Frank Herbert. I have them all. I'm going to be reading them eventually. But this book, when I read it last year, like I wanted to read it obviously before the movie came out. But it hit me on such an emotional level, and I felt so invested in the story of Paul and of Jessica and like Duke Leto Atreides, and it was one of those that just pulled me through the story. Like the more I read, the more I wanted to know more and more. I just learned about this planet of Arrakis, about spice, about the Kiswach Haderach. Like it was just this book. I mean, there's a reason why Dune is so many, it's the number one book of a lot of booktubers out there. And for good reason. Like it hits, like I think one of the reasons too, it's one of the undertones that kind of flows through the book is that idea of, sustainability, of taking care of your planet and being a steward. And it hits on a very philosophical human level. I really like the Fremen too. I know, Wheel of Time, like the Aiel were, influenced by the Fremen, or Robert Jordan was influenced by Frank Herbert's Fremen to make the Aiel. It's just such a culturally iconic book, and when I read it, I absolutely enjoyed it. I finished it after like 3 or 4 days, and I just wanted to pick it right back up because it was so good. And it's just capturing that lightning in a bottle again when you read it, and you connect with all these characters. And it's there's very few books in this world, I think, that have happened for me like that. All right, so number two is actually a book I read this year, and this book blew me away. It's probably my second favorite book of all time. That's probably a list I'm going to be making too eventually, get out my top 10 books of all time. But this book, it had so many stand up and shout moments. For a massive book, it had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. I couldn't wait to turn each page, get to each chapter. And it's the third book in a series. And the second book was such a fantastic book. I didn't picture or think that the author could write an even better book than the second book, and he did. So that third book is The Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio. Again, this book is just an absolute masterpiece. I would wipe my mind and read this again and enjoy all the like jaw-dropping moments. Like there's so many times in that book where I was just like, no way, mind blown. And like there's a certain portion of the book where there's a certain section where it's just literally like I was like standing up and cheering, like just not believing what he wrote in those pages. So yeah, The Demon in White is such it's a huge book. Like this book is a monster. And it's, when you can read, an 800-page book in like 3 or 4 days and just be flabbergasted, blown away by it, that's the sign of a good book. And that is, again, this is a book that if I could wipe my mind, I'd read it in a heartbeat. I mean, the good thing going for if I wipe my mind, I'll still have read Empire of Silence and Howling Dark, so I know it's going to be good. And I'm actually currently reading Ashes of Man right now, as I got the arc, and it's blowing me away too. So, but I'm prepared for Christopher Rocchio to hurt me, because Kingdoms of Death was pretty painful too. So, yeah. So my number 2 is The Demon in White. Okay, so my number 1 book of all time, it probably is my favorite book of all time. That I read this actually last year too, and it's a book that was my introduction to the Discworld. It's the first Discworld book I read, and it just hit me on such an emotional level. I connected with all the characters, I connected with the world, and that is Going Postal by Terry Pratchett, my favorite Discworld novel. The first Discworld novel I read too, and it's one of those, if I go back and read it, will I love it just as much? I think I would, actually. You know, I've watched the Going Postal movie that was done by BBC, and I absolutely adored it. And you know, it's just one of those books that, again, it's all about timing. Like, I was in a spot in my mind to read Discworld, and I picked it up, you know, thinking this is 41 book series. I did a little bit of research, I didn't know where to start, and I was on the Discworld Emporium, and I saw this chart they had, and they showed you all the best starting places, and I'm like, you know what? I found Going Postal while I was thrifting. You know, this is supposed to be a good starting place, and that's where I started. And I have no regrets in that, and that's actually sparked my love for the Discworld and why it's my favorite series of all time now. So, yeah, I think, like, if I could erase my memory and go back and read it, like, I'd probably just enjoy it, like, even more, I think, now, because I guess if I erase my memory now, I'll have read all the other Discworld books up to it, but I don't know if it would still be my favorite. So it's hard, but I absolutely love it. I do want to talk now at the end of this list is some honorable mentions that you know, I highly considered for the list, but just didn't scrape that top 5 for me. So let's bring those books out now. All right, so my 2 honorable mentions, I'm going to bring them up quick. That is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien and The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So both of these are fantastic books. The Hobbit obviously is a book I read in my childhood, or not childhood, I guess my teen years. I loved it. Very iconic. I listened to it again this year with the Andy Serkis narration. It's just it's a very special book, has a very special place in my heart. I don't think, I'm just thinking back now when I first read it for the first time, I don't think I, you know, really actually enjoyed the book. I remember reading it and thinking, oh yeah, it's really good, but like, you know, I was reading Aragon at the time, like, it's no Aragon, but like, and then, you know, now when I read it again, like when I think I was in grade 11, and it was the second time that I read it that it really kind of cemented my mind, like, okay, no, this is brilliant. This is a piece of art, and this is such a whimsical tale that, you know, like, Aragon can't even hold a candle to it now. So I think if I was to wipe my memory, it would be the second time I read it and enjoy it again for that second time. And so for The Way of Kings, this is actually the first Sanderson novel I ever read. I jumped in at Stormlight, and yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved this book. There's so many moments in it where it gets you right in that emotional kind of center where you're just like, oh, you're killing me here, Sanderson. But it has a lot of uplifting moments too, and a lot of feel good moments too, and a lot of, like, you know, again, stand up and shout moments too, like Rocchio. So yeah, guys, that was my list. Like, my 5 books and some honorable mentions of that. If I could have wiped my memory, read them again for the first time, those are the books I would pick. So I would really love to know, like, what are your picks? Like, you know, what series or books are on your top 5? It's a really interesting question. You know, my wife kind of posed it to me, and it's kind of rattled in my brain for a few days. I'm like, yeah, I think this would be a fun video to talk about, because I'm sure every reader has thought about this, like, just it's like blank slate, go into to one of my favorite books again. And but it's hard, right? Like I said, like, you can't, I'm a firm believer in you can't cross that same river twice. And, you know, you're different as a person for actually reading those books. And, you know, without reading those books, would you still be the same person? So that's it from me, guys. You know, again, just comment down below. I'd love to hear your list, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.